Hey there, Cape Crusaders, the Comics Kid 2099 here to discuss a Superman the Animated Series 3-parter. Today I will be talking about World's Finest, the first Batman-Superman team-up of the DC Animated Universe. So if you haven't seen this one, go watch it, or risk hearing spoilers from this point forward. In Gotham City, Joker steals what appears to be a 20-pound jade dragon. Spoilers, it's actually kryptonite. Batman figures this out and goes to Metropolis, where Bruce Wayne has a partnership with Lex Luthor, building robots that will revolutionize space travel. But Lex wants to use them in war, and Bruce says no. Meanwhile, the Joker proposes that Lex hires Joker for $1 billion to kill Superman. Luthor agrees, but Joker's scheme does not work. Meanwhile, Batman and Superman discover each other's secret identities, while Bruce is trying to woo Lois Lane. Lois eventually finds out Batman's secret identity, but promises not to write a story on it. After Joker's multiple foul-ups at killing Superman, and even linking his attempts to his partnership with Lex, Lex attempts to betray Joker, but Joker beats him to the punch and betrays Lex. Superman and Batman team up, initially to find Lex, who they now know is teaming up with the Joker, but then to stop Joker from destroying half of Metropolis. The episode ends with Luthor basically able to plausibly deny his partnership with the Joker, though he now has lost his business partnership with Bruce Wayne. And after Lois says she doesn't want to date Bruce anymore, Superman and Batman go their separate ways, with more respect and admiration for each other than when they first met. Cue credits. So okay, there is a lot going on here. While any normal episode of this series would have 1 or 2 characters to juggle, this 3-parter has 4 or 5 to keep up with. So I'm going to try to tackle each character and subplot one at a time without losing track of what is going on, so bear with me here. So let's start with the villains, Joker and Lex. Lex is mostly in the background here, and that's because of the corporate businessman angle this show has borrowed from the John Byrne Superman relaunch of the mid-1980s, with Lex being seen as a good guy by pretty much everyone in Metropolis except for the 4 main employees of the Daily Planet. You can't very easily have him engaged in a supervillain team-up. Unless you want to severely break the status quo, which this series never really did, then you have to find a way to steer the plot of the episode in such a direction where Lex can say he didn't do it and nobody can say that he did. They even mention in a commentary on the first part on the DVD that it would have been much easier to have had these two team up if they were doing the Mad Scientist version from the 50s and 60s. But since they had already long been committed to this version, they had to find a way to make this work, and it just so happens that meant putting Lex largely in the background of this episode. He's still there just a little bit, but it's really Joker doing all of the supervillain stuff. And speaking of Joker, he's there. His motivations don't make much sense, which I guess since he's the Joker and he's crazy, they don't have to, but it seems like Joker always had a little bit more internal consistency to what he did in Batman the Animated Series than what he does here. So maybe that's what's bugging me. But hey, it's been a little while since I saw any of those Joker episodes, so maybe my mind is playing tricks on me here. But the whole reason for his team up, according to the Joker, is that for the past few weeks, Batman has been foiling his plans, so he decided to come to Metropolis, where he thinks it will be easy peasy to kill Superman, and I guess start a new life of crime away from Batman. I have a few issues with this. 1, just a few weeks? Joker's schemes have been foiled by Batman for at least a year if you look at how much time passed during the events of Batman the Animated Series. Heck, just 6 months passed between the 2 parts of the Two-Face origin episode, so I would say we're closer to 2 years for the entire Batman the Animated Series timeline. And we don't even know how long Joker was around before the events of Christmas with the Joker. But Joker tells Lex that Batman's been dogging his heels, and it's apparently enough to make him want to leave Gotham. So why didn't Joker leave Gotham at any point before this? Why even stay in Gotham at all? Some versions of the Joker, like Heath Ledger's version in the Dark Knight movie, see themselves as being the other half to Batman, and they have no real desire to leave Gotham or be rid of Batman. And while there is an obsessiveness to the Joker in this universe, he's tried to kill Batman numerous times, so I don't think that you can go to the explanation that he needs Batman to feel complete. And then you have Joker wanting Lex to pay him $1 billion to kill Superman. Let's ignore the fact that Joker really shouldn't be motivated by money at all. I've said before that the Joker, at least the way I see the Joker, commits crimes that he thinks are funny and plays a cat and mouse game with Batman. None of that involves money, unless he needs copious amounts of money to pull a giant prank on Batman. But Batman seems to know that Joker is strapped for cash at the beginning of this episode, and we're not really told what that means. Does he owe money to a gangster? Why not just kill off the guy that you owe money to? Does he owe money to the IRS again? Oh wait, that hasn't happened yet. Okay, let's just ignore the fact that Joker being motivated by money is kinda dumb and pretend like it makes sense for his character. Again, going to the Dark Knight, Joker says if you're good at something, never do it for free. So I guess this is fine. But wait, later when Joker wants to destroy Metropolis, Lex offers money for his own safety, and Joker turns him down. That doesn't make any sense at all. And speaking of things not making any sense, why does Luthor decide to hire Joker in the first place? Yes, Superman is a nuisance to many of Luthor's plans, but he could hire anybody to kill Superman, and they would be much more stable than the Joker is in any case. But Comics Kid 2099, he doesn't have any kryptonite to do the deed. If he's willing to pay Joker $1 billion for doing the deed, what if if he just bought the kryptonite for $1 billion? I know Joker is irrational, but I think he would be down for that. It'd be less work, and then Luthor could hire someone else for a few thousand to do the job with the kryptonite dragon. Sure, then you wouldn't have a villain team up, which you kinda want if you're going to have a hero team up, but it still makes little sense for our characters to behave so inconsistently. Moving on to our heroes, I do like that we are sort of following up on Lois's adventure in the alternate reality in Brave New Metropolis. The whole premise of that episode was that Superman loves Lois, and she finds out just how much, and when she comes back to her world, she now has a chance to pursue a relationship with him. Now, one of my big problems when I reviewed that episode was that she doesn't, and that their relationship goes nowhere in the entire DC animated universe. But this clearly shows Lois wanting to ask Superman out, and when that fails, she goes for Bruce Wayne. Now, I'm gonna assume they weren't actually thinking of Brave New Metropolis, and they were just wanting to find a reason to pair off Bruce with Lois here, but it's still cool that this episode can be read that way. As far as Lois's relationship with Bruce, it's weird that they try to take it so far that she's about to transfer to Gotham to be closer to Bruce. And this isn't just that the idea has come up in conversation, she's brought it up to her boss. I do find it hard to buy that any romance could go so fast in such a short amount of time. She meets Bruce about halfway through the first part, and then it's in the second part when she mentions this to Clark. Sure, we don't know how much time has passed, but I don't think that it's much more than a week. From the conversation at the beginning of the second part between Clark and Bruce, it does seem like they have come to some kind of tenuous understanding where they will at least cease hostilities with each other if they are not going to work together. So at least a little bit of time has passed. But for this romance to have progressed so far that Lois is willing to completely relocate cities, I already have enough trouble buying romance subplots progressing so fast in fiction anyway, but with these two characters, first you have Lois, who is probably the most cynical character in this series, and if there is anyone in all of fiction that I would say does not believe in love, or is at least really close to not believing in love, based on every version of Lois Lane that I have seen, Lois Lane would be the person who is really close to not believing in love. And then there's Bruce Wayne, who we the audience know has had one very serious romantic relationship at this point in Andrea Beaumont. Sure, there's Zatanna, but she didn't even know his real name, so how serious could it have been? So how do these two get so serious that Lois is thinking about moving to Gotham in such a short span of time? Like I said, I can rarely buy romantic subplots in superhero stories, but that's just because they're rarely handled very well. And unfortunately, I have to say this one isn't handled very well either. So moving on to the non-romantic pairing in this episode, we have Superman and Batman. Neither of them really have much of an arc beyond learning to accept the other one as a potential friend and partner. It's not really a gradual thing that you can chart with specific moments in the episodes either. The first episode had one confrontation between them because Superman doesn't tolerate vigilantes in his city. I'm not really sure what makes Batman different than Superman in this instance though. Sure, Superman's got the president's blessing as of this episode when he saved Air Force One from terrorists, but he's still unlicensed. Nobody knows Superman's real name. The only difference between them is that Batman is willing to go just a little bit further than Superman is, and he has to, since he doesn't have godlike powers to depend on like Superman does. The terrorists know that they're screwed whenever they find out Lois Lane is on the plane with them because they fear Superman's abilities, but Batman has to dangle criminals off of skyscrapers to get the same results. If this three-parter had leaned in that direction for this reason that Superman and Batman don't get along, I think that would have been a little bit better. In any case, it seems most of the arc happens off-screen for these two in between part 1 and part 2. At the beginning of part 2, we've got Clark asking Bruce how it's going finding the Joker, which, as I mentioned earlier, indicates some lessening of the hostilities between them, though they still don't like each other. But it seems now it's mostly Lois who is the bone of contention, and not their methods of crime fighting. Then, by the end of part 2, they're at least able to work together even if they don't like each other still. This is mostly out of necessity, as they will both die, and Lois as well, if they don't quickly find a way out of the death trap that Joker has left them in. And of course, by the end of part 3, Superman has saved Batman's life, and Batman seems to like Superman much more because of this. And with Lois deciding that she can't deal with Bruce being Batman, that seems to be the biggest major obstacle of their animosity out of the way. So when everyone complained that Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice had Superman and Batman overcome their differences because of a common woman, well, that had a precedent here. Okay, that's not really fair. Batman vs. Superman is one of my least favorite movies of all time, not just superhero movies, so I really shouldn't compare it to this three-parter, or any part of the DC animated universe for that matter. And I should note that even though a lot of the elements of the story fall apart upon close inspection, I really did enjoy this episode a lot. It's maybe one of my favorite Superman episodes we've had so far, at least on an entertainment level. If anything, I appreciate it a great deal because without this, I don't know if we would have the DC animated universe as a whole. Sure, many of the same people who worked on this series also worked on Batman the Animated Series, but you can't assume the two shows are set in the same world just because they share creative personnel. That would be like assuming that the Beauty and the Beast TV series and the Moonlight TV series are set in the same universe because they shared Ron Kozlow as a writer. And you might point to sly references like in the three-part pilot of this series where Martha Kent mentioned that nut in Gotham City, but we've had references like that before in DC properties. Batman Forever mentions the city of Metropolis, Superman Returns mentions the city of Gotham, but nothing else indicates that these versions versions of these characters coexist in a larger universe with each other. For that matter, many of the creators of this series have gone on to work on other superhero properties not set in the DC animated universe. Glenn Murakami worked on Teen Titans, which is a maybe, and Beware the Batman, which is definitely not. Alan Burnett and Paul Dini both worked on Crypto the Superdog. So just because we had two shows that involved the same people working on them does not mean that the DC animated universe was destined to happen. And when you listen to the commentary on part 1 of this story, and Burnett talks about how long and difficult of a process it was to hammer this story out, I am really happy this episode did happen, and that it led to further stories which continued the DC animated universe for another 10 years after this episode. And despite my somewhat jokey comparison to Batman vs Superman earlier, this really is light years ahead of that movie and should be commended for that. Overall, I like this episode a lot, not only for its historical status in the history of the DC animated universe, but also it was just a really fun episode. It may not hold up very well when you look at character consistency and story points, but I still liked it a lot, and I love going back to watch it just for fun. So those are my very extended thoughts on this episode. I hope you guys liked it, and will come back and hear my thoughts on another episode next weekend. And be sure to see what else I do during the week when I'm not talking about Superman the Animated Series. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.